Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of UK Edu Stories with myself, Yusuf, and my co-host and friend, Mark Anderson. This week is a very special edition because it's Meet the Author. We've actually got three authors who have been published by Bloomsbury. Thank you for sharing this. Abigail Mann, James Hilton, and Maria O'Neill. So we just want to give a mention to and thanks to Bloomsbury for publishing this for sponsoring this particular episode. Bloomsbury Education publishes books for schools and educators to inspire teaching, learning, and young minds. From practical classroom resources, lesson plans, and professional development, to side-splitting poetry and fantastic fiction for struggling readers, you will have everything to meet your needs. Covering early years, primary and secondary, Bloomsbury Education works with its highly experienced and trusted authors to support teachers and engage learners. You can find out more information about them online at bloomsbury.com/education. Hey.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you so much, Bloomsbury, for supporting us with this episode. They've supported us in lots of ways, Bookie, haven't they? Not only with sort of sharing three fantastic guests, so I'm really looking forward to having a good chat with this evening. But ladies and gentlemen, viewers, this evening, audience, they have sponsored this episode tonight by sharing some prizes of books. And so if you'd like to be entered into our little prize draw, got the little wheel of names tool here ready loaded up. So to be able to sort of take part in the competition, all you need to do is come into the live chat, drop your name in there. Don't just put Mark because that's quite a common name. But if you could put maybe your Twitter handle in there with your name, so like Mark at ICT Evangelist would be me. And then what we'll do is we will towards the end of the show, we will spin the wheel like so. And then once that's done, it'll pick a winner. And there are three pairs of books to be won. One from Abby. Oh, look, I've won. Yeah.
It's a fix.
It's a fix. It was 50-50, to be fair. But a pair of books. Maria's book isn't out yet, although she has shared on Twitter that she's happy to send out some books as well. But for the time being, that'll be a copy of, and I'm assuming it's Abby's latest book,
Yes.
and a copy of James's latest book, because both Abby and James have both written more than one book. So really keen to find out more and dig into what they've been writing about. I know that the topics are around pastoral from Maria and leadership from James and well-being and mindfulness from Abby. So really looking forward to sort of digging into all those sort of things throughout the episode this evening. As I say, take part in the competition this evening. All you have to do is drop your name and your, I would say your Twitter handle, not your email. We'll be in touch with you after the show and then link you up with Bloomsbury so that they can send out the prizes to you. So really looking forward to this evening. But before we get into the nitty gritty of things, Bookie, how are you? How's your week been?
Good, busy. I felt really stressed. I was reaching the time of year. Christmas is almost here. We've only got a few weeks left to the end of this really long term. So I felt moments of stress, but really great. Lots of different things. So the BAME Educators Google training, I don't even know what the official title of it took place formally yesterday, and I missed it. Couldn't get into it, but I'm going to have an opportunity to join in. But it's really great. So Lawrence Tijani, if I mispronounced your surname, really sorry. But Lawrence, thank you so much. And Ben as well. It's really good. I did some intervention with Year 11s this week for the first time in Essex. So that was quite an interesting experience. Lovely experience. But lots of different things as always, lots of projects. But ending the week on a positive note. Thank you, Mark. How's your week been?
Super. Busy as always. Tuesday was particularly interesting. I did the opening keynote presentation for the Guests EdTech Virtual Summit in Dubai. Unfortunately, didn't get to go to Dubai this time, but that was really good. And one thing that was really interesting, Ollie Lewis, my co-host on Learn Live UE, and I did a live episode of the show as a panel debate live from the conference. And that was fantastic. Some great conversations with a wide variety of local educators and school leaders from the region. So fantastic day there. And it's a whole 2-day event as well with some fantastic learning. And actually, if you wanted to find out more about that, go to GESS leaders.com. You can actually watch back all of the various sessions and keynotes and seminars and panel debates and all of that. And I learned loads. Not just through the things that I was sort of sharing, but also from the things that I got to visit and see as part of that. It was a great CPD event. So yeah, that was good. And the rest of it, really busy. I've been really busy this week as well, Bookie, as you know, preparing for something that's happening on the 10th of December.
Oh, I wonder what that is. Let me think.
It's Teach Me UK Edu Stories. Yeah, really excited. We're getting everything sort of lined up and prepared for that. Got some prizes set up as well. Net Support are supporting us with the event as well. They're donating a £50 Amazon voucher as one of the prizes, and getting a whole bunch of things sort of lined up around that. So please keep that date free in your diary, 5:30 till 8 p.m. And in fact, I was talking with one of our guests, Abigail Mann, just before we went live today as well, and she has said and that she's going to confirm tomorrow. So I'm not going to stitch her up completely. But said that she should be able to sort of present there as well. So I'm really keen to hear from her, but also Dr. Jill Berry, got Howell Roberts, Tom Rogers, Nina Jackson, lots of great educators coming along and sharing at the Teach Meet. So really excited for that. But enough of you and me nattering on and everything, Bookie. We're 6 minutes in already.
Yeah.
Before having our first guest, though, please do, if you want to be in with a chance for winning a copy of James's and Abby's book, then please drop your name and your Twitter handle into the live chats here on YouTube and Periscope, and then we'll be able to enter your names into that prize draw at the end of the show. So, Bookie, first guest, who's coming in first this evening?
Abigail Mann will be joining us first. Very much looking forward to this.
Brilliant stuff. So welcome to the show, Abby.
Hi, how are you both?
Keeping well, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Yeah, I'm here off the back of a parents' evening.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. We really appreciate that even more.
It's fine. It wasn't bad at all.
Okay, fantastic.
Long day for you though, Abby.
It wasn't too bad. The sort of lockdown way of parents' evening is actually quicker, I think, because you can call them and get the conversation. I mean, I think it's a shorter conversation on phone than it might be in person. I think people tend to chat a little bit more, don't they? So the interview, the appointment times were much shorter than expected. But good conversations. Good.
Okay, I like that time efficiency. That's good.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, look, I mean, I've known you for many years, Abby, and I've been to your school and all sorts. But for those who don't know you, as Bookie and I do, could you just explain who you are, where you work, the role and context you work in a little bit, just to sort of set the scene, if that's okay?
Yep, sure. So I am currently an associate assistant head at a school called Whitefield in Barnet. So sort of Zone 2 London. And I'm currently, I was promoted to associate assistant head about a week before lockdown. So things have been quite strange for me. And before that, I was head of English, and I'm still doing both roles at the same time. But you both have interacted with me through Twitter, and that's how we know each other. Mm-hmm. And a large part of that has been promoting wellbeing through conferences for about 5 or so years now, maybe longer. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's at least 6 years.
Yeah. Time just
it's been a long time, hasn't it?
It certainly does. Okay, so can I ask, talk about your book, because I know you've got 2 books. What was the inspiration behind your books? I know they both talk about well-being, so I just mentioned that collectively.
Yeah, so I think probably in my early careers as a teacher, I'm in my 12th year of teaching now, but in my early career, I was definitely working too hard and not having as much impact as I might have wanted to have. And I wouldn't say I was on the verge of burning out, but I definitely felt I needed to address the situation. And so actually joining Twitter was really instrumental in that process for me.
Okay.
And although I joined Twitter in 2009, I didn't know what it was, and I didn't have a clue how to use it until about 2013. And that's when I started actually promoting workload and wellbeing ideas and discussion on Twitter with the sort of edgy Twitter community. And as a result of that, I ended up sharing ideas of my own and focusing on well-being a little bit more. And there was at the time there was something called Staff Room. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah,
The sort of blog platform that was around, and that was great because you had a 500 word limit, which meant that you could jot down your ideas and get them out there quite quickly. And that was a place where I was sharing lots of ideas to do with well-being in schools. And as a result of that, somebody said, why don't you send off a book proposal? So I did, and it was approved, and the rest is history, really.
Fantastic. And I know you've had some, is it nominations or something like that with regards to your very first book? Am I right in thinking that?
I have to say I wasn't very good at tracking its progress at all, and it was somebody, a friend of mine said, do you know that your book is in the top 10 of a category on Amazon? And I said, I don't even know how you check that kind of information. And by the time I got around to checking it, it was at number 1 in the philosophy of education, which was amazing, wonderful news. And then shortly after that, it won an award. It won the Gold Award for the Practical Preschools Awards, which I was really surprised at, because although it's aimed at all educators, I didn't envisage it being something that preschool educators would be using. So that was quite a nice surprise.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations for that.
Thanks, thank you.
Okay, on to you, Mark.
Thanks, Bookie. That's fantastic to learn. I wasn't aware of that. It's lovely when you see sort of reviews coming in and all these sort of things on Amazon about your book. It's a lovely feeling and experience to know the things you share resonate. One of the things I found quite difficult was the writing process. I'm in the process of writing another book myself at the moment, Abby. How did you find the writing process, and what did you put in place to ensure that you stuck with it and got it done?
So actually, I found the writing process quite difficult for the first book because I didn't really know what I was doing, if I'm totally honest. I had no idea how to write a book. But I was given quite a lot of advice from my editor, and she kind of steered me through in the direction that she wanted it to kind of look like. And one of the things that I really practiced was just ignoring the inner critic and the imposter syndrome that people experience. And I was often sort of plagued with, oh, what have you got to say that it hasn't already been said, and what do you know? And because the book was very sort of instructional as well, I was worried all the time that it was coming across as quite bossy and commanding, and I had to sort of stamp on that voice, that inner critic, and just get on with it, essentially. And one of the other things that I did that really helped was blocking out time for the book, so knowing when I was going to do it and not booking anything else in that time, essentially, so that I spaced it out across the year and the time that I had to complete it. So yeah, 2 things: listening to your inner voice and squashing it, and then making time for yourself.
Sounds a bit like some advice you might find inside the book there then, Abby.
Yes, that is one of the ideas in the book. Well noted.
Talking of time and blocking out time, sorry. What would, so when you are in your writing, you're writing, what would your typical day be like when you're actually writing, when you've actually carved out time dedicated to writing?
So I am a big advocate of exercise as well. So any day for me is broken up with short spells of exercise. Even when I'm on duty outside, I'm walking on duty. Okay. I'm never just standing. So that would be something that I did in terms of the writing process. I'd set out a couple of hours. It was usually weekend work for me. I never really did any evening writing, or holidays. So half terms, Easter, Christmas, they all took a bit of a hit during the writing process. And yeah, it was definitely blocked. And one of the things that I also did was when I was thinking about ideas, because you can block out a week and then think, right, I've got to get 20 ideas written up here. But if you haven't got any ideas ready to go, that's quite a problem. So jotting down ideas as I was teaching and as I was going through the year, and then planning to write about those in that specific time was quite helpful. But it's sort of forward thinking and planning ahead that allowed those blocked out times to be quite successful.
Okay, thank you. I love the tip as well about actually just jotting down your notes as and when they came to you. Because sometimes the inspiration is lost, and then planning your time around that, because obviously that's more productive, as you say. Otherwise, you're just sitting there waiting for the ideas to come.
Exactly. Yeah, my brain doesn't work like that.
Way. Yeah, exactly. All right, thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Brilliant, thank you, Bookie. Did you need any sort of special? You talk about sort of making notes and ideas as they came to you and all the rest of it. But did you have to do any sort of special research or have any sort of specialist knowledge to help you sort of write the book, Abby?
Certainly, definitely went down the research route a lot more with the second book, if I'm being honest. And lots of the ideas that I've included are about stress busting. So I was doing research into the science behind what relieves stress, for example, and including some of that in the ideas before I introduced the idea. And that was definitely a stronger focus of mine in the second book, I would say. And also, a lot of the second book is about being a really effective teacher. So I was doing research around expert teaching and the sort of pseudoscience and the myths that surround education with regard to certain psychological theories. That was all something I had in the forefront of my mind when I was writing this, and I wanted to avoid all of that and ensure that what I was writing about in terms of well-being for students was evidence-based and was stuff that I could share that was valid.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Bookie, over to you for the next question, please.
Thank you. You mentioned it before, but what was the most difficult part of the writing process? Were there any particular aspects?
I think for me, it was probably trying to accept that I was writing a book.
What do you think? What do you think?
Just I'm my own worst critic. I really am, and I have to listen. I have to learn to ignore that voice in me frequently. And I don't think it gets any easier for me. I try so hard to accept that the book was successful, wonderful, and then I got the second book offer, and I thought, oh, they're going to find out sooner or later. But I'm much better at listening to more positive thoughts in my head. But yeah, I think just the imposter syndrome for me was the hardest thing. And honestly, when the first book was released and published, I was just on the edge of my seat for the whole day, because I thought, what are people going to think about this? And yeah, for me, that was the hardest thing. But the second book came much easier.
Okay, cool. And I think it's true to say that, when you put something out there, it's creative, there is always a moment in thinking about what others will think about it, really. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that honestly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Abby. Just to wrap up the conversation here, can you share one idea from your book that you think would be particularly resonant for our viewers? Something that's a little takeaway that they might find helpful?
Do you know, at the moment, because the book is about student well-being and essentially a positive and successful experience for students at school, I think two of the chapters that I really am enjoying are the first one, which is about how they can look after their own well-being, and the second one, which is about how they can support the well-being of others. And the sense of community that I've seen amongst our students at school at the moment has just been wonderful. And we're doing something at the moment in school called a kindness bomb. So students are writing on Post-its in their classes, and they are writing notes to teachers or support staff, and they're sticking them on their doors as they go past. Without anyone knowing what's happening. So teachers are opening their doors and seeing these wonderful little notes from their students, just notes of thanks essentially, and it's having a real positive impact around the school. So I would say definitely just working towards supporting each other and allowing students to be able to do that.
Oh, that sounds really lovely. What was the inspiration for that idea?
I honestly don't know. It just came into my head last week, but it fits in very well with the chapter 2, which is recognition, mission, and supporting each other. I just think we all need a bit of a pick-me-up. You know, we're at the end of a very difficult term, and it's really tangible. It's in the air. You can feel it, and I just think it's a nice gesture if people are recognising the sort of support that each of us offer.
Oh, that sounds lovely. It sounds like a lovely place to work as well, Abby. Having those sort of things happening, it's a whole school approach, isn't it? As well, it can't happen in isolation. How do you, just jumping in, following up? How sort of well sort of taken up is that idea with all the students? Do you find there's lots and lots of these messages being shared, or?
Yes, well, it's just started this week and it's going well. People are starting to pick up on it. And another area that we're focusing on is we usually have a senior citizens Christmas party this term, and that's not able to happen. We can't get the elderly from the local homes to visit the school. So all of the forms are writing Christmas cards and sending them over to the residents, which we're really excited about. So small things like that are sort of spreading through the school over these last few weeks.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that idea. And I'm sure that'll be of real interest to our audience as well. Thank you so much, Abby.
You're welcome.
Right. You're very welcome too. It's time to bring our next guest. Do you want to introduce our next guest, Puppy?
Yes, James. Welcome to UK Edu Stories.
Good evening. Thank you.
It's very good to see you this evening.
And you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So if there's, for our audience members that haven't come across you or your book, would you mind actually introducing yourself, please, and the context of your role?
Okay. My name's James. I come from Derby. I spent 26 years in primary education. I was a senior leader for 23 years and a head for 15 years. Latterly, 10 years as the head of a very large primary school that grew to be just over 800. But for the last 7 years, I've been working as a speaker and a writer, talking about mental well-being. And I do quite a lot of conference and public speaking. Hey, not so much this year, as it turns out. Not the best time in a global pandemic for public speaking, but there we go. So I get to work with all sorts of businesses and organisations, local government, NHS, universities. But if I'm being absolutely honest, I still tend to think of schools and education as being my home audience. That's where I feel the most comfortable because it's what I know.
Yeah, that's understandable. Thank you so much for your introduction. I'll hand over to Mark for your very first question.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Bucky. James, for people who've not read your book, could you tell us a little bit about it? It's your most recent book, that is. And as you know, we spoke before the show, so you know that both Bucky and I have read it because we mentioned it on a previous show. But for those who haven't read it, could you tell us a little bit about the book and what the key messages are inside the book, please?
Okay. Well, I've been interviewing and meeting school leaders from across the country for 6 or 7 years now. And I've got to meet some people that I really admire and I've learnt a lot from, because I think one of the features of my books is that I got a lot of things wrong, and I share those with people in the hope that they don't fall into some of the same traps that I did. So they can learn from my mistakes without actually having to make them themselves. But it was whilst I was writing my second book that I actually became quite intrigued with the idea of why some school leaders fall out of love with leadership at some point, perhaps in their career, and whilst others who probably face exactly the same dilemmas and exactly the same adversity still manage to maintain their enthusiasm for the job, which can sometimes be a challenge. And I think that this year of all years, it's been a real challenge. So although it was written pre-COVID, I think a lot of what the book talks about is actually very applicable to the situation that many school leaders found themselves in this year in particular.
You know, I completely agree with that. Thank you very much for sharing that, James. Bookie, over to you for the next question.
All right, thank you, Mark. So, James, how did you find the actual writing process? And I know you've written a number of books. How did you find it initially when you first started? And how does it compare to the latter books you've written?
Like Abby, I think when I started the first book, I didn't really have much of a clue of what I was doing. I was a bit worried I'd get to the end of writing it and Bloomsbury would turn around and say, "Nah." But I think with the second and third, I think I probably got a little bit more confident in structuring the book. I mean, in the first one, I stuck very, very closely to the proposal that I gave in to the publishers. Second and third, I took a few more sort of liberties in changing the order and changing the structure of the book, because I was more confident of the flow and how that might work. Having said that, there was a big block in this last book where I had complete writer's block for about 2 months. My mum passed away during, and actually one of the chapters of the book, I think there's a 2-page gap which just represents the period of time that I didn't write anything, because every time I tried to sit down and write anything, it was just kind of nonsense. So in that sense, that third one was a little bit harder because I had to kind of work through that. But in other ways, I think I have got into a bit more of a flow and a rhythm of writing, and I think I probably know what my style is better than I did when I first set out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry. Yes, showing the news that you shared as well, and it's really interesting about how you took more creative license with like the structure and layout of your book. Once you got more confidence, it just sounds like you took more ownership of it. And I like what you said about the fact that you now have worked out your writing style as well, which I think is really important because that often comes through as well. So thank you for sharing that, James. Over to you, Mark, for the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Bookie. And I'm actually going to ask this to both of you, actually, because Abby mentioned in her responses about imposter syndrome, and you've alluded to it a little bit in your conversation, James, as well. Have you ever thought about, James, writing under a pseudonym rather than your own name?
I did briefly, because I mean, particularly in my first book, I talk about a period of time when actually, as a school leader, I did burn out, and I was off work for a period of time. And I talk about how some of what happened and how I got back to work and how I adjusted what I did and I learned to cope with the job, which was kind of very personal stuff. And I was a bit wary of putting that out, and how, for example, parents and governors might perceive that. Ultimately, for a number of reasons, but partly because I wanted to tell the story as honestly as possible, I moved on from a second headship, and I thought, right, okay, now I can tell it in a format which hopefully will be helpful to other people, but is actually pretty true to myself without having to worry about what people think. And like Abby, I was very wary of how people would react when that first book came out. And I'd bump into parents in the supermarket, and went on local radio, and I thought, you really are laying yourself open here. But actually, everybody was, lovely in their reactions. I couldn't have asked for better reactions and more support from people. It was brilliant.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, as you say, it is really, really personal, and I would add sort of very brave of you as well. It's got hallmarks of another book I've read by Dave Harris called Brave Leadership, and Brave Head, isn't he? I guess as well, though, James, it gives you that opportunity to sort of control the narrative as well, because when you're the person sort of telling the story, you can tell it in the way that you want it to be told, and share the messages that you want to share, can't you? So thank you so much for sharing that. Again, a really personal response. Really very kind of you to share on that sort of a level. Thank you. Bucky, to you for the next question, please.
Okay, so James, this is a slight tangent. What do you now know that you'd wished you'd known at the beginning of your writing journey?
I wish, I think, like Abby, really, I had more self-belief at the beginning. I wish I'd have been a bit more savvy about some of the rules of writing, which I didn't appreciate. So, for example, number one, there are rules about how long a quotation you can use from somebody else without their permission, which I didn't realize the first time round. So I ended up having to go back through the book and, chuck out this bit, chuck that bit, or end up paraphrasing what people had said rather than directly quoting. So I wish I'd known that. And the other trap that I think I fell into in the first book is I used almost sort of transcripts of some of my interviews with people.
Right.
But the problem with that was that you kept having to go back to people to get them signed off. And sometimes they come back to you and say, no, I want this bit changing, or I want that bit changing. So sometimes you'd think you'd finished a section or a chapter, and then you get an email and you think, oh, blimey, I've got to go back over that. I've got to alter it again. So that was a little bit frustrating. And I didn't do that in book 2 or book 3. But I think equally, because people had known I'd written a book already, so ought to know what I was doing. I think people were a bit more willing to trust that I would do what they said serviced and not misquote them.
Okay, thank you so much. Can I sorry, Mark, before we hand over to you, can I just ask one more question? You mentioned about some of the traps that you can fall into when you're first writing a book. Are there any other traps that you feel that writers may fall into when they start to write their first book?
I think the really important thing. I mean, when I first started talking about well-being, writing about well-being, actually there wasn't much being written about teacher well-being at all at that stage. Fortunately, there's some really good stuff coming out now, and Bloomsbury, bless them, have been fantastic in their range of stuff on well-being. Can't speak highly enough of them. But I think sometimes it's about knowing what your USP in writing the book is, and finding that USP, because you may well be tackling a subject that somebody else has tackled before. So what is, what's your edge? What's your distinctive USP really that's going to stand out, that's going to make people want to pick up your book on that subject and read it?
Okay, thank you. Great tip. Appreciate that. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Bucky. There's some great advice there being shared there, James. Thank you so much for that. On a personal level, that's really helpful for me. So thank you very much for sharing that. But just sort of following up, it's a follow-up question, really. But what's the best advice you've ever been given about writing a book? Did you seek out advice from other authors before you started and all those sort of things?
I did. And the best advice I was given was, write about what you know. And I nearly did a book 2 on pupil well-being and dealing with stress. And I abandoned the idea because actually I thought, I don't feel as comfortable in this area, and I think there are people with greater expertise than me who could write better books on this subject than I can. I think, James, you're better sticking with leadership because that's what you know. So that was, I think, the really important thing. And the other one that I was given was particularly with the first book, was tell the story, tell a human story, because people relate to a human story, but particularly one where there's hope through adversity, which is something I think we all need.
No, I completely agree with that. And on the flip, actually, that's one of the approaches that some companies take with all of their marketing and advertising. If you think about Apple, for example, if you look at a lot of their actual branding, advertising, it's about sort of telling that human story and the successful thing to have with their products. And as a species, we live our lives through learning from others and the stories that we tell each other, don't we? So, I mean, that sort of resonates with what you're sharing there. Some fantastic advice again there. Thank you very much indeed, James. Over to you, Bookie.
Okay, thank you. So, James, when you completed your first book, did you celebrate in any way?
The first one, no, not really.
Was there a reason?
I think a friend bought me a mug with a picture of the book cover on it. I don't know. I think we might have opened a bottle of bubbly, but nothing particularly dramatic, and certainly not this time round because it came out in the middle of of national lockdown. So it was a very muted affair, I would have to say.
All right, I didn't expect you to say that. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Right. Yeah, I didn't expect you to say that.
No launch party.
It's the mug that just got me chuckling. Okay. Okay, over to you, Mark. I'm going to have to sit back and just compose myself.
I'll use my superpowers and take you out for a second, Bookie, shall I?
Okay.
James, did you ever sort of suffer from writer's block at all? And if you did, how did you overcome it?
I didn't used to think it was a thing, but it definitely is. But I mean, aside from that sort of couple of month period when my mum passed away, I had it a bit on both book 2 and book 3. And I think the first time it happened, it kind of panicked me. Because although I think I had a year to write it, being the way I am, I think I waited a couple of months before I even got started. So I kind of felt a bit more under pressure of time. But I think after it happened more than once, I came to realise that actually it was probably just part of the writing process, and actually to go with it. Because what I found was if I sat in front of a keyboard when I got it, I could write stuff. But I'd look back on the end of 2 or 3 hours work and what I'd written was garbage. So it was better to take a break and go out, get some fresh air and walk the dog, or do something different than to try and rigidly sit down in front of the keyboard and type when your head's just not in the right place to do that.
Yeah, that sounds like some great advice there. I've got a follow-up question, if that's okay. You mentioned typing there. Could you explain sort of how you actually went about? What tools did you use? Did you just sit down and load up Word and just start typing, or did you use any sort of distraction? There are lots of word processing tools which are like distraction free, aren't there? Which sort of don't have loads of toolbars and options and things. Was there anything you approached differently, or any tools you used that might be of interest to our viewers as well?
It was mainly just keyboard, really. I find I don't write very well in short bursts. I need at least half a day to be sitting in front of the keyboard. I can't sit down for an hour and try and do a bit, because next time I come to it, a bit like reading a book at night, look at it the following evening, you can't remember what you read the night before, and sometimes I can't remember what I wrote the day before. So I do actually need a decent block of time, and a bit like Abby, I think I tried to block out periods of time, because doing conference speaking, conferences don't come across the year anyway. They tend to come in particular times of year. So even pre-COVID, you had slack periods. So they were the periods that I could kind of block out. And sometimes we know somebody who's got a cottage in Wales. Off season, they would sometimes let me use that. And I just go away for a week and take the dog with me and hunker down and crack on. But in terms of technology, you were asking, I did use a bit of voice processing on the last book. mainly because I'm getting a bit old. My fingers start to get a bit stiff after a while. So if I'm typing for more than a couple of hours, they start to lock up a bit. But to be honest, I had mixed success with it because I spent so much time going over and editing what the voice recognition software thought I'd said. That by the time I'd done it, I'm not sure that the gains were actually huge, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it is one of the things. It can be actually more of a hindrance to use the sort of dictation tools than to actually sit there and type it. I find that when I'm writing my blogs, even just because if you when you're looking at you look at the screen, don't you? And so if you see it makes a mistake, you don't think, oh, I've got to fix that mistake, and then that flow that you would normally have, if you're just sitting there and typing, tends to go. I find.
No, I agree. Agree with you totally.
Well, I'm mindful of the time, and we've still got Maria to bring in, Bookie. Should we bring Maria in? Thank you so much for your insights. I've really learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Brilliant. Okay, let's bring Maria in then. Welcome, Maria. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for actually agreeing to join, actually. So, for our viewers who don't know who you are and what you do, would you mind introducing yourself, please, and explain the context that you work within?
Okay, so I'm better known as Pastoral Leader on Twitter. I work in a secondary school as a pastoral leader. So I do quite a lot of work for pastoral curriculum and everything related to that. Used to be responsible for e-safety as well. So loads of different pastoral roles: charity, e-safety, pastoral curriculum. I also founded Pastoral Support Organization. Currently PhD student and writing a book. Yeah, so quite a bit going on here.
You sound busier than I am.
That's not possible,
That's
Bucky.
impressive.
That's not possible.
All right, thanks for your introduction, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. What inspires you to write a book about pastoral leadership?
I think my personal experience played a huge part in that. And I started my career as an academic leader. I had it all planned out, get into the head of department, get into the assistant head, deputy head teacher. I had it all planned out. I became an advanced skills teacher. So I was working within the federation and training heads of departments, presenting at the DFE visits and doing all that stuff. And suddenly I had 2 children and I thought, oh, sugar, it's tough. So I took a step back. And I went in as just the head of subject in a different school. And since then, my role has been very much pastoral. So I went from being advanced skills teacher, SLT, to just a pastoral role. And I thought, okay, there is nothing with pastoral leaders. There are a lot of things going on for academic leaders, teaching and learning, curriculum. But for pastoral, there was nothing that would unite all the different areas of pastoral support or pastoral care. So that's why I founded Pastoral Support Organization. And afterwards, I have 2 children. My son is 17, and he went through a stage where he became suicidal, and it really hit me really hard, because the pastoral care in schools does matter, and it can be a huge difference between someone succeeding and someone failing, and someone being excluded and not belonging. Through personal experience, I've dealt with loads of outside agencies, external agencies, camps, and it made me realize even more how valuable it is what we do at schools, because the waiting list for camps or anything like that, it just, we encourage young people to speak out, and they do speak out, and nothing happens. So that was the main motivation, to see how schools can cope with that particular situation and do as much as they can for pupils in the meantime.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That's a very personal story there, much like James's. Thank you for being so open and sharing that with us. Thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to take a break for a second just to remind people, if you'd like to be in with a chance for winning copies of James and Abby's book, please do ping your name and your Twitter handle into the chat, either on YouTube or on the Periscope app. We're going to add your name into the Wheel of Names tool to put you in for a chance of winning a copy of those books. Thank you. Over to you, Bookie.
Okay, thank you. So Maria, we've asked this question to Abby and James. So just want to find out from you, how did you find the writing process?
I'm someone who loves a challenge, so I set myself a challenge of doing PhD and writing a book in the same year. Little did I know. So I was writing a book in 80,000 words for my PhD, and at the same time, I clearly overestimated my writing abilities, but it was really good. I enjoyed the challenge. I'm driven by the challenge. So lockdown came in the wrong at the wrong time, because although it's just changed tremendously the way we work in schools, and though I had everything planned out completely up to T, this is when I'm doing this is when I'm doing that, with the lockdown and teaching online and pastoral care online, it put me behind, if I'm honest. So I didn't like that bit, but I enjoyed the rest.
Okay, thank you. And it's interesting about how you try and readjust. So sorry, I'll just ask another question. In that regard, when you devoted time to write, what can you describe what your typical day would be like then in that case?
I had all my evenings planned, to write after the online teaching and after my walk. It didn't happen all the time, so I decided to dedicate my weekends to writing, and that helped a lot. Like people mentioned beforehand, having longer periods of time rather than shorter periods of time, and that really helped. Going for a walk, just enjoying the nature, reconnecting with yourself, and then having that a bit more motivation to write something. Definitely bringing as much positivity as possible, because I found that you've got to be in a right state of mind to write it. You've got to be almost, lift yourself up to some sort of level so you can flow. Otherwise, you're just sitting there and staring at the screen and nothing's coming out. It's all. So yeah, just a combination of things, but
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. What I've not shared until this point is the fact that I've been writing a book for Bloomsbury, but I have no idea how long, and now I can see why it's taking so long. Because usually I'm just sat there like, okay, yeah. But I love the fact that you said that you give your time to reconnect with nature and be more of I suppose, a mindful state, so that it helps the writing process as well. So thank you very much for sharing that. Over to you, Mark. The next question.
Thank you so much, Brookie. One of the questions that I asked James when he was being interviewed a few minutes ago was around the sort of advice he gave and advice he was given about writing a book. What was the best bit of advice that you were given about approaching writing a book from anybody, please?
if I'm honest, I have never asked for advice, and I've never been given advice. It's just happened. I know I probably approached it the wrong way, but I had so many ideas and I had so much passion, and I was writing my PhD, and it kept on telling, something just inside me kept on saying, look, you're writing already quite a lot. Why don't you put it in a format that is accessible for teachers and professionals? There is a huge chapter in my book about well-being, and very often adults don't understand what well-being is. So how can we explain it to pupils? And that sort of prompted me to say to myself, look, you have got some valuable stuff. Why don't you just put it in a different format? And that sort of happened naturally. I suppose it is because I was writing my PhD at the same time, and I had already research and everything else there. It doesn't mean to say that I doubt it a lot myself. I come from Russia. My native language is Russian. What on earth am I doing writing my book in English? What's going on here? Who's going to read it? And what right have I got? What Abby and James said before. why would people be interested in what I've got to say? But I
Mhm.
do feel like I have got quite a lot to, through my experiences in England and of educational system and pastoral care. I do feel I have got something to say that I want people to hear.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I'm an independent thinking associate, and that's an organisation headed up by Ian Gilbert, and he says that everybody has a book inside them and everybody has something to share. So that definitely resonates with me, what you're saying there. Thank you so much for that, Maria. Thank you. Bookie, over to you for the next question.
Okay, thank you. So my question, I'll start with you, Maria, but actually I'm going to pose this question to all three of you. So when it comes to marketing or promoting your book, which strategies have you found that have worked the best? So Maria, I appreciate the fact that your book's not been published, but have there been any things you've done that have actually helped raise awareness of your upcoming book?
I think it is about telling, for me, it is very personal. It is about telling my story and telling why I'm passionate about what I'm doing and how it could help, teachers and parents as well, who could find themselves in my situation. So for me, it has been telling a story, different social media conferences. I do mentor pastoral leaders on a postgraduate course. So it is sort of naturally mentioning what I feel passionate about. That's me at the moment. I'm sure that something more will happen when the book is actually out. And oh gosh, I've got to start, But at the moment, it has been that progression of very slowly telling my story.
Okay, thank you so much. James, which particular strategies have helped you?
Well, Bloomsbury's marketing department themselves were great on all three books. But one thing I did do is I have a friend contact who is a digital marketing specialist. Now, anybody knows me knows I'm pretty rubbish at technology and pretty dire on social media as well. I about manage Twitter, but that's about the limit of it. So I met up with her, and she kind of helped me to draw up a bit of a plan of what things I ought to be considering when, and what sort of content to put out, and kind of try and build up a bit of anticipation of the book coming out. So we did. I hosted a web session, a Q&A. I can't believe I did that. I don't know how you guys do this because it was the most stressful hour and a half of my life. So we did that, and some competition giveaways and various other bits and bobs. And I think that certainly helped, having somebody you knew who was kind of in the know.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. What made it stressful though, James?
What? Well, I'm not very good at the technology. So, I mean, if anybody can wreck technology, I can. So there was that aspect of it, and trying to manage those people who were coming in with questions and try and keeping on top of everything that was actually happening on screen, and then having something approaching a reasonable answer to the questions that they may have. So yeah, don't worry. I'm not going to be treading on your shoes anytime soon.
I didn't even I wasn't even hinting at that. And just to say, I raised my hand. If anyone can damage tech, it is me 10 times over. So if I can do it, you can as well, James.
You're very kind.
Okay, and Maria, which particular strategies have worked best when it comes to the promotion of your book?
I think you mean Abby.
Oh God, sorry. I'm saying Maria. Oh God, sorry. I wondered why Abby was sorry. Abby.
It's totally fine. Yeah, so for my first book, I was much better at this actually. I did lots of things. All my different social media channels were getting constant sort of traffic about this and build up towards the sort of publication date. I presented at quite a lot of conferences. I did a book launch. There were competitions on Twitter. I wrote to university providers to tell them about the book. I was really on it. And this time around, I've not been quite as proactive. I'm still doing a few odd competitions and things on Twitter, but also this time around, there's quite a lot of contributors in the book. So I've been using their names and getting them to share it as well, which is quite useful.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm impressed with the range of strategies that you use. You mentioned beforehand. So yeah, that's very impressive. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
allyship is really helpful. I found that myself as well, Abby. You know, you bring people with you on that journey, and something from mine, the people that you include as case studies, some of the schools that were involved, you know, a few of those teachers and school leaders were on Twitter as well, and they were as excited about being inside my book as they were for everything else as well. So again, bringing people with you and sharing that sort of stuff as part of your journey is super helpful as well too. I think we lost you for a second then, look. But no, you're absolutely right. It's a great way of doing it. And I think maybe with your first book as well, you mentioned Staff Room earlier on, Abby, as well. That was a great community, people all blogging and sharing together.
Wonderful.
A community of Staff Room. There were lots of great things that came out of that. Dr. Jill Berry, for example, was somebody who wrote lots and lots on Staff Room, and that sort of led to her getting and sharing and having that sort of community around her when she released her book about moving from deputy head and all those sort of things. So yeah, it's a great approach. I'm just looking at the time now. We only got 4 minutes left. I think, Bookie, before we go into the final question, which is sort of sharing some top tips and things for James and for Maria, should we just do the quick spin of the wheel? To see
Yes, please. Yes.
Because we're on a marketing sort of front, aren't we? So let me just bring this up now. And this is your last chance. If you are watching and you haven't dropped your name in, then please just drop that into the chat. I'm going to have to leave the screen to do this, though, Bookie. So if somebody adds their name in whilst I'm talking now, here we go. You've got Mr. P Teaching just done his there. I'll put Mr. P Teaching as well then. Hang on a second. At Mr. P _ Teach. I think that's right. Anyone else pop their names in there, Bookie?
Okay. Let me just, not that I can see right now. Oh.
There we go. All right, cool. Right, I'll bring this up now then. The opportunities are quite good for those who pop their names in. Here we go. Let's see how we get on. So we're looking for, I think, 3 winners, isn't it, Bookie? So let's give it a spin and see who we get as our first winner. Is that you, James? Put your name in there.
No.
Oh, Sarah, that's great. Fantastic.
Great there from Sarah Hazel. Fantastic. I'll just copy her name there quickly. Believe it or not, I'll remove her. And next up is, I'll do a little fake drum roll. There we go, Amy Flores. Well done. Fantastic. And then the final winner is...
Ooh.
Oh, there we go.
That was really close.
I believe that's our previous guest from the northeast of England, Sam Keys, who came on the show about literacy, I believe. So well done and congratulations to our 3 winners, Sarah, Amy, and Sam Keys. If that is Sam Keys, I think it is. So remove that out. Brilliant. Well, thank you for taking part in that competition, everybody. And we'll be in touch after the show to link you up with Bloomsbury so that you can get hold of those books. Thank you very much for taking part. So we asked a question, I think it was of Abby, about sharing one idea from your book on well-being. But moving to Maria first and then over to you, James, could you share one idea from your book on pastoral leadership, Maria, that you think might be particularly helpful or useful for our viewers? Maybe one which should be useful for sort of teachers in general, rather than perhaps sort of heads of house and heads of year and those sorts of pastoral leads that could be useful sort of for form tutors, perhaps.
Okay. There are a number of practical ideas that are there, but if I just change the question a little bit, if I talk about the whole school culture, I think whatever it is, it has got to be the right school culture, and it is up to the leaders to ensure that well-being and proactive pastoral care can thrive in that particular context. No matter how much staff are doing, no matter how much children are doing, it has got to be nurtured and established from the top a lot of times, and that's very, very important to have a community which is values-based, which is ethical community, where diversity is promoted. And again, all of that can only happen if there is the right the right environment. I do talk about the garden, and I talk because I love gardening and it motivates me. But when you sow seeds, you have got to have the right soil. You know, you have got to prepare the soil. Nothing will grow if the soil is not prepared. And it's
Yeah.
like that with the school culture as well. You have got the right school culture in order for people to, and students, you know, adults, everybody who's working there, and children to flourish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's brilliant advice. And I love the analogy as well, Maria. Thank you very much indeed. James, have you got a sort of leadership tip that you think would be helpful, particularly maybe
Yes.
under the lockdown we find ourselves now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that there is no one way to do school leadership. It's not a one size fits all. So forget some of the stereotypes that used to exist about you had to be a certain personality type in order to be a successful leader. That's a myth. I think that rule book has long since been torn up. It's about having vision. It's about having confidence in yourself, understanding yourself, knowing what your strengths, what your areas for development are, and some of your triggers and your insecurities. Because the more you understand yourself, the more successful you'll be.
Great summary.
Brilliant advice. Thank you very much, James. And just so you don't feel left out, Abby, was there anything else you felt you could share? Another little hint or tip for teachers or
Put me on the spot now.
I know, I'm sorry.
I would say allow, at this present stage, allow teachers to just focus on the core business that they're there for, which is teaching, and avoid all those extra workload commitments that are unnecessary.
Yeah, that is some fantastic advice and a great way, I think, to start to wrap up the show. So brilliant stuff. Over to you, Brookie.
Okay, so thank you to everyone that's actually joined us. Thank you again to our guests, Abby, James, and Maria, for your time and actually just taking the opportunity to talk about your books and for us to learn a little bit more about the inspiration behind it as well. Those of you that have joined us, please make sure you tune in next week at the usual time of 8 o'clock. But I think we'll be wrapping up now for this week's episode of UK Edu Stories. Stay safe, everyone, and have a good evening. Take care then. Bye.
Take care. Thank you, everybody. And thank you again to Bloomsbury for supporting us and sponsoring this episode. Thank you ever so much. And please take care and stay safe. Thank you.